Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. Today I have chosen the international edition of the Hindu for a detailed analysis because compared to the Delhi edition, we had many more articles which are important for our exams. So I have chosen the international edition and I have selected around 12 articles for the analysis today. We have 5 articles that require a detailed discussion both for prelims and mains and few small articles which are relevant for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from our initiative, do let us know through your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now before we start, we have a very important announcement. Tomorrow, which is the 20th of September, marks the beginning of 2024 mains examination. So to all those aspirants who are appearing for the mains exam starting from tomorrow, I wish all the very best and I hope that our initiatives have helped you in your preparation. But for others who would like to understand the trend of this year's question papers and also look at the questions and understand how to approach answer writing, we are going to conduct the paper analysis sessions on the very same day after the examination ends. So take a look. After the essay paper tomorrow at 2 p.m, we are going to go live on our YouTube channel to discuss the essay paper, and similarly for all the other papers on 21st and 22nd of September. We'll also be coming out with first reaction videos to help you understand the general trend of the papers, and in these sessions we'll provide a detailed analysis with a detailed discussion. So don't miss out these sessions, especially for 2025 aspirants. These sessions can be very, very useful to help you prepare for the mains exam. So on this note, let's begin the discussion by looking at the first article from page number 1. Yesterday, the Union Cabinet has taken a historic decision. The Union Cabinet has approved the proposal to implement one nation, one election, or also called as simultaneous elections. The recommendations of Ramnath Kovind Committee have been accepted by the government, and the government is paving the way for the rollout of simultaneous elections in the country. So this is a very big development. So let's quickly understand what are simultaneous elections. What is the background? Why are simultaneous elections needed? What are the advantages? What are the concerns? What's the criticism? And how the government plans to roll out simultaneous elections in the country. See, when we say simultaneous elections, it essentially refers to parallel elections being held to the Lok Sabha, the state assemblies, and probably even local bodies as well, your municipal bodies and Panchayati Raj institutions. So when elections are held together to these legislatures, right, when they are conducted simultaneously, we refer to that as simultaneous elections. So of course, the conduct of such simultaneous elections has its own advantages, but there could be drawbacks and concerns as well. So let's see whether India had simultaneous elections before. Initially, after independence, after the constitution was adopted, the first 2 general elections were actually held simultaneously in 1952 and 1957. The election cycle of Lok Sabhas and state legislatures was in harmony, was in synchronization. This synchronization was first broken in Kerala in 1959 when the centre imposed president's rule in Kerala by invoking the powers of Article 356. As a result, the Kerala State Assembly was prematurely dissolved, and this broke the synchronization of Lok Sabha elections with state assembly elections. Subsequently, in the 1960s, defections from one party to another increased. Several new regional parties were formed. Several new parties were formed where the party leaders, they defected from the Congress essentially, leading to the breakdown of the political parties in the country. Large scale defections happened at the state level, and as a result, after 1967, several state assemblies were prematurely dissolved. mainly due to increasing defections from one party to another at the regional level. Several state governments collapsed, state assemblies had to be dissolved, and premature elections had to be held. So as a result, simultaneous elections came to an end in the country. Essentially, the synchronization that existed between the Lok Sabha elections and state assembly elections was broken. And currently, there are only 4 states which go to simultaneous polls with Lok Sabha. That is Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, and Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. These are the only 4 state assemblies in the country which currently, as of now, go for simultaneous polls with your Lok Sabha elections. But otherwise, for every other state, elections are held in different cycles, which doesn't match with the Lok Sabha cycle. Now, the concern is when such elections are held, when separate elections for Lok Sabha and state assembly is held periodically, this has its own set of drawbacks. So to address that, one way is to come back to the simultaneous mode of elections. And in fact, over the years, there has been a push given by various bodies and key institutions to return India back to simultaneous elections. In fact, this idea was first proposed by the Election Commission itself back in 1983. It was backed by the Law Commission headed by Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy in 1999, and both these bodies, they supported the reintroduction of simultaneous elections. The Vajpayee government in 2003 took up the initiative more seriously, and Prime Minister Vajpayee even held a discussion with then opposition leader Sonia Gandhi, who also appeared to be on board the idea. Essentially, political parties were trying to build consensus at the national level to bring back simultaneous elections. The issue was again discussed under the Manmohan Singh government with then opposition leader L.K. Advani back in 2010. But despite all these recommendations and initiatives, the idea was never given a concrete push. But under the Modi government, the issue has been taken up seriously, and the Prime Minister has made it a top priority to push for one nation, one election. In fact, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice, Personnel and Grievances came out with a report back in 2015 which highlighted the benefits, the advantages of conducting simultaneous elections and strongly recommended the rollout of simultaneous elections in the country. Even the Niti Aayog and the Law Commission in 2019 have backed the idea of introducing simultaneous elections. But the idea got a major push in 2019 when Prime Minister Modi spoke about the need for one nation, one election during his Independence Day speech. When he delivered the Independence Day speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort in 2019, he pointed out that one nation, one election has several benefits, and he showed a strong commitment that if the government is elected back, that the BJP-led government would be pushing for simultaneous elections. So as per the promises made, in 2023, the Modi government constituted a high-level committee to consider the proposal. This committee was headed by former President of India, Shri Ramnath Kovind. So this committee was given the mandate to consult all the stakeholders and come out with recommendations, because the idea to introduce simultaneous elections requires a number of constitutional amendments. In some cases, it would require the consensus of states as well. It would require consensus with political parties, consultation with Election Commission and other stakeholders. So this high-level committee headed by former President Ramnath Kovind consulted with all the stakeholders, considered all the possibilities, and earlier this year submitted the report to President Draupadi Murmu in March 2024. To examine the recommendations of the report, the government had set up a committee of ministers. Finally, the government has accepted these recommendations, and yesterday the cabinet has approved the rollout of simultaneous elections. So this means the government is going to draft a constitution amendment bill which should be enacted in the parliament, and eventually, after the required changes are done into the constitution and the other legal changes which has to be introduced with consensus with the states, eventually we might be looking at the introduction of simultaneous elections in India. So let's first understand the benefits. What are the advantages? And then let's look at the criticism, because opposition leaders currently, they have raised a big concern about introduction of simultaneous elections. So let's understand both sides of the argument. And then let's see how exactly the proposal will be rolled out. What are the recommendations of Ramnath Kovind committee, and what kind of constitutional amendments are necessary, whether states' approval is needed or not, right? So let's take a look at this, and that is what you need to know from this article. See, when you conduct simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha and state assemblies, definitely there will be a lot of benefits, lot of advantages. One big advantage would be that the massive electoral expenditure incurred by the Election Commission, this can go down significantly. When separate elections are held, the Election Commission is constantly conducting election after election, which significantly increases the expenditure on elections. Because conducting a massive democratic exercise is not an easy task. It not only requires tremendous logistics and resources and manpower, it requires a lot of money as well. So the unnecessary expenditure can be brought down, can be reduced by conducting simultaneous polls to Lok Sabha, State Assembly, maybe even the local bodies. But more importantly, it can end the policy paralysis and push the governments, the elected executive, to focus on governance and administration instead of being constantly in election mode. It's often said that Indian politicians, they're always in election mode, because every year there is some election or the other happening. You have a Lok Sabha election, then there could be some state assembly election, next year again some state assembly elections. So throughout the 5-year period, there would be elections being conducted in some part of the country or the other, and hence political parties and their leaders, they are constantly in a campaign mode, focusing more on election campaigns. You would have seen our top leaders as well, always delivering election speeches and trying to impress the voters. This might push parties to, prioritize populist schemes, which could be wasteful on the exchequer. But in order to please the voters and attract the voters, they might come out with populist schemes, even promote hate speech, create divisions in the society constantly, right? And also this affects administration. It leads to a policy paralysis, because every now and then model code of conduct will come into force, which is implemented by the Election Commission of India. During the election phase, the MCC is brought in place to ensure the conduct of free and fair, transparent elections. So this restricts the decision-making powers of the government. Governments can't bring out new schemes, new initiatives during the MCC period, and this leads to a policy paralysis. So if simultaneous elections are brought back, it can push the government, the elected representatives, to focus on governance, administration, and focus on taking decisions which are in national interest instead of constantly being in election mode. Then this will also improve the delivery of services as governance becomes more smooth and streamlined, and the legislatures at the center and state level, and maybe at the local level, if they are guaranteed a 5-year term, right? So this ensures there is more stability as well, provides for better delivery of public and government services, and more importantly, reduces the burden on the government machinery, because elections are eventually conducted by the government machinery, right? The Election Commission depends on the bureaucracy, the police and security forces. So when elections are happening constantly, there is a big strain on the bureaucracy, on the security forces, on the government machinery, which is again a drain of manpower and drain of resources of the government, which otherwise could be focused on governance, administration, and law and order. So this reduces the burden on manpower, on government machinery. So these are the various advantages and benefits of conducting simultaneous elections. But however, there can be drawbacks. There are very strong arguments against the reintroduction of simultaneous elections. The biggest concern pointed out by the opposition is that this could benefit a few dominant parties at the national level. This could go against the very spirit of democracy and federalism, because when such elections are held simultaneously, if you just take Lok Sabha and State Assembly elections, such elections could generally be fought on national issues like foreign policy, defense, and security, with undermining of regional issues and regional concerns. For example, let's say India's counter-terrorism efforts, or India's diplomacy towards Pakistan, or India's global standing. Such issues might attract more focus and attention. Political parties at the national level, which have a dominant presence, might push the campaign towards the national issues and national achievements, which could essentially subdue and undermine the regional voices, the regional concerns that could affect the small parties and regional parties as well. So this could weaken federalism, go against the spirit of the constitution. And also don't forget, in order to ensure that state assemblies are in harmony and in synchronization with the Lok Sabha, to roll out the simultaneous elections, the term of the state assemblies will have to be artificially altered. For some state assemblies, the term may have to be extended beyond the constitutionally mandated 5-year term, and in some cases it may have to be curtailed so that the assemblies are dissolved and elections can be held simultaneously. So this artificial curtailment or extension of the tenure of the state assembly could curtail the choices of the voters. Now let's say, for example, in 2029, we are all set to hold simultaneous elections. So there could be state assembly which has been constituted in 2026, 2027. Their term is supposed to be for 5 years, but the term will be curtailed by 2029 and fresh elections will be held in those states. So this undermines the value of the vote. It undermines the choice of the voter. In some states, the assembly tenure may have to be extended to match with the Lok Sabha cycle. So this again limits the choice of the voter. Maybe the voters are not happy with the current state government. They want to exercise their franchise. They want to provide for political accountability and remove that government from power. But if the tenure is extended, the government will remain in power for a few more months or maybe a year. And this could undermine democracy, weaken federalism. It will undermine regional issues, giving more priority for national issues, and the big parties, the dominant parties at national level, they will have an advantage. They can project the national issues, their achievements, which usually will undermine the small regional issues. But in reality, it's the regional issues which affect you more, the local issues which affect your day-to-day life, right? So such issues could get lesser attention and there could be greater focus on national issues which may not affect your day-to-day life. This could give an unfair advantage for dominant parties, national level parties and the big parties, and this is something that could erode democracy. It erodes the choice of the voter, could mislead the voter as well, right, to focus only on national issues and neglect the regional issues. It could be a disadvantage and it could be unfair for small parties and regional parties. And also don't forget, conducting a simultaneous election is not going to be an easy task. See, right now Election Commission breaks down the election cycle into different phases. Even state assembly elections sometimes are held in different phases, so that the manpower can be mobilized, security forces can be moved around and correctly deployed, and all the logistics can be arranged, right? The government officials can be deployed, all the electoral machinery from EVMs to ink and all the documents can be moved, right, which is a huge exercise. So conducting a simultaneous election will not be an easy task. This could further strain the government machinery, put severe stress on the manpower, and it could make it a logistical nightmare, maybe even increase the cost as well, right? So there are concerns, arguments against the introduction of simultaneous elections. But the Ramnath Kovind committee strongly believes that simultaneous elections has more benefits. Law Commission, Niti Aayog and even Election Commission has supported the introduction of simultaneous elections, and it is seen as a major electoral reform. The Modi government has strongly backed this idea by stating that this will strengthen democracy in the country. It will allow governments to focus on governance instead of being in a campaign mode. But to bring out these changes, several constitutional amendments are necessary. The Ramnath Kovind committee has recommended a total of 18 constitutional amendments, because Article 83 and 172 that deal with the duration of the Houses of Parliament and the state legislatures will have to be amended to bring the tenure of Lok Sabha and State Assembly in sync, to curtail a few state assemblies and to extend the tenure of few state assemblies. These articles will have to be amended, Article 83 and 172. Article 85 and 174 dealing with dissolution of Lok Sabha and state assemblies, respectively by the President and the Governor, will also have to be amended. Article 356 concerning President's rule, the powers of Election Commission under Article 324, and even the RPA, Representation of People Act 1951. So, these constitutional provisions will have to be amended to pave the way for simultaneous elections. A total of 18 constitutional amendments will be necessary if simultaneous elections have to be introduced to center, that is the Lok Sabha, the states at the state assembly level, and eventually the local bodies. The proposal includes simultaneous elections for Panchayati Raj institutions and even municipal bodies. Now, let's see as to how the government is likely to go about this. After the approval by the Union Cabinet, the government has informed the media that Ramnath Kovind Committee has laid out a roadmap. Essentially, simultaneous elections will be introduced in two phases. In the first phase, there will be one constitution amendment bill moved under Article 368 to pave the way for simultaneous Lok Sabha and state assembly elections. So, first priority would be to align the elections of Lok Sabha with the state assembly elections. So, for this, there is no need for consensus with states, because conducting elections is completely under the jurisdiction of the Election Commission. Election Commission has sole mandate over this. The center, the parliament, is capable and it has the constitutional mandate to make these changes. Of course, a special majority would be needed. A special majority would be needed in the parliament under the provisions of Article 368 to introduce these changes. There is no need for any approval from states. More than half the states need not approve the amendment. It's not necessary in the first phase of simultaneous elections, where Lok Sabha elections will be synchronized with state assembly elections, because this is completely under the jurisdiction of Election Commission, so it does not affect federalism. It doesn't concern the states, right? So, the parliament can go ahead with a special majority. If the constitutional amendments are passed, then simultaneous elections in the first phase will be rolled out with amendment under Article 368. But in the second phase, the plan is to introduce simultaneous elections for local bodies as well within 100 days of the first phase. Approximately in another 3 months after the synchronization of Lok Sabha and state assembly elections, the second phase will be rolled out with focus on local body elections. Now, who conducts the local body elections? Your Panchayati Raj elections and municipal body elections. It is conducted by your State Election Commission. This falls under the jurisdiction of the state as per the 7th schedule, right? So, this is where the center not only requires special majority under Article 368 in the parliament, but it will also have to get consensus from 50% of the states. More than half the states will have to support the constitutional amendment, because this would involve making changes to elections to local bodies, which is conducted by State Election Commission. And also for this purpose, there is a requirement for a common electoral roll and a single voter ID card. To introduce this as well, consensus with states is necessary. For Election Commission of India to work with state election commissions and to bring out a single electoral roll for the whole country with a single voter ID for every voter. To introduce this provision, state consensus is necessary. More than half the states will have to approve the constitutional amendment, and the center, of course, will have to get special majority in the parliament. So, this is the roadmap which has been laid out. So, going forward, the government will take up the process of drafting these constitution amendment bills, and let's see how the process will continue from there on. So, this is what you need to understand from this important topic. Now, let's look at the next article. On page number 1, 14 and 15, we have 3 articles referring to the deadly attacks that occurred in Lebanon. A couple of days ago, thousands of pager explosions were reported in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah fighters. Several deaths were reported, thousands of injuries were reported, and yesterday, the cycle of explosions have continued. Essentially, just a day after the pager explosions, few other electronic devices have exploded across Lebanon and even in Syria. This time walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah fighters and even solar equipment installed in houses have exploded, resulting in further deaths and injuries. And clearly this attack is aimed at targeting Hezbollah, which is a radical political militant organization based out of Lebanon. Now, I have covered this entire topic in great detail in a separate session that I conducted yesterday. If you haven't watched the session, please go to the YouTube channel, go to the video section and watch this video completely, because I have covered this topic in complete detail, starting right from what is Hezbollah to the nature of these attacks, who could be behind these attacks. Obviously, Hezbollah and even Iran have blamed Israel, and every possible evidence as of now indicates the involvement of Israeli intelligence agencies such as Mossad. Now, this scale of attack is absolutely unprecedented. This is something never seen. This is a new type of hybrid warfare that Israel might have launched, and it destabilizes the region, escalates the tensions in the region, and we might even be staring at a retaliation by Hezbollah, a further increase in the conflict, further escalation by Iran, because Hezbollah is one of the proxies of Iran. Iran has been using proxy groups like Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis to target Israel and even American interests. So, since the Gaza war began last year, tensions between Israel and Iran have gone up, and as Israel has targeted Hamas in Gaza, the other proxies of Iran, Hezbollah and Houthis, have extended support to Palestinian cause and to support Hamas and Iranian interests, and they have targeted Israel. So as Israel fights Hamas in Gaza Strip, it is also involved in a conflict with Hezbollah towards its northern borders. So these are some major developments happening in West Asia. It has severe implications for India as well. That's why I've covered this separately in yesterday's session. I urge all of you to go back after the session and watch this and understand the importance of this development. So here what I would like to point out is that, one, Israel has not officially accepted responsibility. Of course, it's a covert operation eventually. Governments don't acknowledge such operations, but every available evidence indicates the state involvement of Israel. But Israeli Defense Minister has given an indication of a possible Israeli involvement. He praised Israeli security forces and security agencies for impressive operations against the enemies of Israel. So probably it was a reference to these covert attacks by detonating electronic devices, thousands of them across Lebanon and Syria, targeting Hezbollah fighters. And also Israel has pointed out that the focus of the war has shifted towards the northern borders. Israel has said that the center of gravity, which was focused on Gaza until now, which meant Israel's priority was targeting Hamas in Gaza, this has now slightly shifted towards the northern borders to target Hezbollah in Lebanon. Because Hezbollah has been carrying out major attacks in northern parts of Israel, which has led to the evacuation and displacement of Israeli citizens across several villages and towns in northern parts of Israel. Israel has retaliated as well. So now we might be looking at the escalation of the conflict, where Israel is placing more focus on targeting Hezbollah, and Israeli leaders have said that the center of gravity of the war has shifted towards the northern borders. And also to understand how exactly the attack was carried out, right? Generally, when such electronic devices explode, or when such attacks are carried out through covert methods, usually it is believed that it's a regular cyber hack, where through a cyber weapon, maybe the hackers got into the device, controlled it and caused an explosion. But that is not the case what happened in Lebanon. If you look at the pager explosion, the explosion of the walkie-talkies and the solar equipment, there is something more sinister at work. It's not just a simple case of a cyber hack and remotely detonating a device. It's not just a battery explosion. Israel most likely has resorted to a new form of hybrid warfare, what we call as supply chain attack or supply chain interference. Because even initial reports came from Lebanon that pagers were exploding across the country simultaneously, Initial reports indicated that it could be possibly a remote hack where Israeli agencies had figured out how to, wirelessly hack into the device, causing the processor to overheat and leading the battery to burn and explode. But if you look at the kind of injuries that people have suffered, right, and if you look at the nature of the explosion, if you look at the visuals, the evidence available, it is inconsistent with a battery explosion, a regular battery explosion. It is more consistent with a deadly explosive, such as plastic explosives. So most experts who have analyzed the footage, who have seen the injuries caused to the victims, right, who have seen the evidence on the ground, they are indicating that most likely Israeli intelligence agencies, they meddled with the supply chain itself right at the production level. These pagers have been linked with a Taiwanese company called Gold Apollo. But this company has denied any involvement. Later reports have shown that these pagers from Taiwan were produced in Hungary through a third party, and maybe Israel's intelligence agency Mossad interfered over here when the pagers were being produced, or maybe when the pagers were in shipment to Lebanon, Israel figured out as to which pager exactly is being used by Hezbollah units to communicate, which company are they ordering from, when exactly is the shipment headed out, and they managed to intercept the shipment. That requires enormous intelligence effort, which shows the intelligence capabilities of Mossad, the reach, the influence of Israeli intelligence agencies, and the human assets that they would need on the ground to carry out such a large-scale operation. So according to reports, most likely in the supply chain, either at the production level when the pagers were being manufactured, or when the pagers were being shipped, somewhere in between in the supply chain, Israeli agencies have tampered with the device. According to reports, more than 5,000 pagers and many more thousand electronic devices, from walkie-talkies to solar equipment, they have been rigged with a miniature explosive. Extremely deadly but stable explosives like PTEN, a military grade explosive. Small quantity of it has been placed in the form of plastic explosives attached with a detonator that can be remotely triggered. Is that clear? See, any bomb requires 5 components. It needs a casing inside which the bomb can be assembled. You need the explosive itself, right? You need a trigger, you need a detonator, and you need the circuitry for that. You need a battery to provide the charge as well. So in electronic devices, at least 3 of the components are already present. A casing is already present. You take a pager or a walkie-talkie, you already have a casing, right, to hold the explosive and the detonator. It already has a battery. Pagers and most devices use lithium batteries or AAA batteries, right? And you also can provide a remote trigger. So only thing needed is an explosive and a detonator, which Israeli agencies have installed. They've intercepted the supply chain somewhere at the production level or in shipment, tampered with the devices, and this is what we call as a supply chain attack. Is that clear? So explosives were planted with a detonator that could be triggered remotely with a coded message. So that is how the explosion was carried out, killing several people, including Hezbollah militants, and thousands of them have been injured, creating panic. Now imagine the psychological impact of this attack. This is also war, psychological warfare at its best. This leads to complete trauma, chaos, gives dominance to Israel, and undermines the adversary. It embarrasses, humiliates the adversary. Both Hezbollah, Iran stand humiliated. Their security gaps have been exposed, right? At the same time, this is a type of indiscriminate attack, which is prohibited under international law. Under Geneva Convention's additional protocol, indiscriminate attacks are illegal, prohibited under customary international law. See, during times of war, states have a right to target the adversary, to target the combatants, to even target terrorists. Those are legitimate military targets. But you can't target civilians and non-combatants. You can't use disproportionate force. You can't use indiscriminate methods of attack. And in the process, you can't end up killing civilians and injuring non-combatants. right? So this is prohibited clearly under international law. If Israel's involvement is established, Israel could even face action, right? International action, because this is a war crime. Because when these detonations happened, there's no guarantee that these devices rigged with explosives were in the hands of militants and terrorists. Civilians could be present nearby. Explosions happened in supermarkets, in city streets, in houses, when people were driving their cars. So this would have led to a lot of civilian deaths and injuries as well, which is a type of indiscriminate attack. There is no way Israel could have controlled as to who exactly would get killed. It's not a targeted attack, it's an indiscriminate attack. This is prohibited under international law and it's seen as a war crime, and the ICC, International Criminal Court, could prosecute Israeli officials and issue arrest warrants against them. So that is a possibility as well. Now, for further understanding of this topic, please go back and watch this video, which I did yesterday, right? So you'll also understand more about supply chain attacks. So this is becoming a reality today, especially countries which import from the outside. They are more prone to supply chain attacks. See, we procure a lot of goods, a lot of commodities, appliances from China. What if China also rigs electronic devices and digital equipment right at the production level or in the supply chain? There are already fears that Chinese companies like Huawei, ZTE, they plant security backdoors through software loopholes which Chinese intelligence agencies can access to hack into our networks and to wage cyber espionage and cyber war campaigns against India. Even major powers like United States have been accused of the same. The US intelligence agencies have leverage over the tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and allegedly they have been forced by US intelligence agencies to create security loopholes in encryption and in their security tools, so that only American agencies can hack into the networks, spy on others, conduct surveillance, and even launch such targeted attacks. Until now, supply chain attacks were largely restricted to software manipulation on the back end in the supply chain, but now Israel has shown that hardware manipulation on a mass scale is possible. Right? Thousands of devices can be fitted with explosives and they can be remotely triggered and detonated. So this presents a new threat, a new emerging threat, a new type of hybrid war, and it raises some dangerous consequences. Now let's look at the next article related to Quad, the quadrilateral. We need to understand the importance of the Quad, what is the role, the function of the Quad, and the upcoming Quad summit. That is the focus of the article here. The Quad, or the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, it's an informal diplomatic grouping of India, United States, Japan, and Australia. These four like-minded democracies came together for the first time in the Indo-Pacific back in 2004, when their respective navies provided disaster management assistance through HADR operations, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, during the Indian Ocean tsunami. The Indian Ocean tsunami had caused widespread destruction across the Indian Ocean region. The navies of these four democracies worked together, gave HADR assistance to assist countries affected by the disaster during the tsunami. Following this, then Japanese leader Shinzo Abe proposed an idea that four like-minded democracies of the Indo-Pacific have to work together, and he informally called it the Asian Security Diamond. He referred to these four countries as the Asian Security Diamond, which could protect the free and open nature of Indo-Pacific. So Japan started promoting the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific because an aggressive China had started threatening freedom of movement, freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight across the Indo-Pacific. So Japan was promoting the idea and it proposed these countries being together. In 2007, in fact, the then Manmohan Singh government went ahead and expanded the Malabar exercise. Malabar was a bilateral naval exercise until then between India and US. So in 2007, India invited Japan, Australia and Singapore as well, and we turned this into a multilateral naval exercise. But following this, China retaliated against India, put pressure on India, and India cancelled the multilateral nature of Malabar exercise, and the idea of quadrilateral had fallen apart. But recently in 2017, the idea was revived. As China got more aggressive and more disruptive in the Indo-Pacific, as it picked several maritime disputes in South China Sea, in East China Sea, displayed military diplomatic aggression against Philippines, Vietnam, Japan and many others, right? The need came up to bring these countries back together to protect international rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. To ensure aggressive countries like China are made to follow the rules. They are made to abide by international law to keep Indo-Pacific free and open. So in 2017, the Quad was formalized. The then Asian Security Diamond became known as the Quad or the Quadrilateral, and in 2021, the first Quad Leaders Summit took place in United States. The first Leaders Summit was held where the leaders of these countries came together. And since then, regular Quad summits are being conducted. So its main focus is on enforcing a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific to maintain the free and open nature of Indo-Pacific and ensure international law such as the UN clause, UN Convention on Law of the Sea is followed and it is enforced in the region. This has always been the top priority. So initially it appeared that Quad was meant to counter China. It was appearing to be a counter to China. Even China went ahead and called Quad as Asian NATO. Since the same countries took part in Malabar exercise, because in 2014 we invited Japan, in 2020 we brought Australia back into Malabar exercise. We returned Malabar back to a multilateral format. So the same 4 Quad members have a naval exercise between them. So China saw this as a military alliance, a military club designed to contain and target China. And China called the Quad as the Asian version of NATO. It condemned these countries for increasing tensions in the region. But India was very clear that it will not be part of any military clubs or military alliances because we follow an independent foreign policy, right? India's interests are not served by picking any unnecessary issues with China. Yes, we want to force China to follow international rules, maintain stability and abandon its aggression. We need support from Australia, Japan and US to contain China, but we are not interested to be part of any military clubs because we know if China were to retaliate, it would likely be against India. India shares a disputed boundary with China. China can deliver significant pain for India as far as the border dispute is concerned. So India was very clear that Quad is not a military grouping. We maintained a distance between Quad and Malabar. We created a clear distinction. Malabar remains a standalone naval exercise between these 4 countries while Quad remains an informal diplomatic group. And today at India's insistence, the Quad has been diversified. It not only focuses on stabilizing the Indo-Pacific and enforcing the rules-based order, it focuses on many other important areas and issues. So that is what we need to learn. See, this year's Quad Summit was supposed to be hosted by India. But at the last minute, at the request of United States, the summit has been shifted to the US. Now this summit comes at a crucial time. On September 21st, the Quad Summit will be held in US. This comes in the backdrop of the UNGA Summit and the UN Summit of the Future, which is taking place on 22nd, 23rd of September. So just one day before these high-profile events in New York, the next Quad Summit is going to happen. And don't forget, 2 of the member countries are headed towards a leadership transition. US is headed to elections, so Joe Biden, his term is coming to an end. And also US President was not in a position to travel to India because of his busy engagement. That is why US requested India to offer the summit to be hosted by US and India graciously agreed. So India will now host the next year's summit, right? Even in Japan, there is a government transition happening. Japan's leader Fumio Kishida has lost support and most likely there will be a change in leadership. So it comes at a crucial time. There are leadership changes happening in US and Japan, right? Plus you have the upcoming UNGA Summit and UN Summit of the Future, which is a very high profile event. And in the midst of this, the Quad countries are meeting to discuss the future of the Indo-Pacific. One main focus area would be maritime domain awareness. Maritime domain awareness mainly refers to the monitoring of the open seas and the oceans, the movement of ships and vessels, ensuring freedom of navigation, freedom of movement, right? So this remains a priority for the Quad. During the Foreign Ministers Quad meeting in Tokyo, the countries had launched the expansion of Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness to cover the Indian Ocean region as well. Under the Quad, there is a Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative focused on Indo-Pacific. So this has been expanded to the Indian Ocean region, and the idea is to protect freedom of navigation, monitor the movement of ships and vessels across the Indo-Pacific, and ensure that nobody disrupts the freedom of navigation, because China has done that. The Chinese Navy, Coast Guard and Chinese Air Force have frequently intercepted foreign vessels and foreign aircraft, and they have targeted foreign vessels as well, which is a violation of the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. This UN Convention guarantees freedom of navigation as a basic right. So to enforce this, to protect this, the Quad countries are coming out with a maritime legal dialogue. There is a proposal to launch a Quad maritime legal dialogue under Quad Maritime Security Working Group, so that the laws can be defined, the legal framework can be created with regard to maritime law, so that the violations of countries like China can be kept under check. So with regard to establishing maritime domain awareness to track the movement of ships in real time and to provide that intelligence, you need a network of radars, you need command and control stations, and there is one such center located right here in India for the Indian Ocean. It's called IFC-IOR. We have discussed about this in previous classes. Information Fusion Center for Indian Ocean region. It's headquartered in Gurugram, Delhi, on the outskirts of Delhi. So, Indian Navy operates IFC-IOR. It basically merges all the radar data collected from across India's coastline, India's island territories, and even from radars installed in foreign countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, etc. So India has a wide network of radars across the Indian Ocean, not just in India but also in other friendly foreign countries, and all the radar data is integrated that provides for maritime domain awareness. So Indian Navy has a complete picture of the Indian Ocean regarding the shipping information, the real-time information. And this command control center in Gurugram is so critical that 12 friendly countries have deployed their liaison officers. 12 friendly navies from Japan, US, UK, France and many other countries. They have deployed their liaison officers to work with Indian Navy at IFC-IOR to share the information in real time, to protect shipping, to keep the shipping lanes free and open, and ensure that rules-based order is followed, to maintain the free and open nature of the Indo-Pacific, to promote freedom of navigation. So India will play a critical role in ensuring maritime domain awareness and free and open nature of the Indo-Pacific. And also please understand that today Quad is a diversified group because of India. India made it clear that Quad will not be a military club or a military alliance. It will not be an Asian NATO. It's not intended only to counter China. Its focus is only to ensure China follows the international law. That's why a maritime legal framework is also being conceptualized. But other than that, today Quad has expanded its agenda and it's focused on many other key areas, from critical emerging technologies to vaccine development, healthcare, epidemic management, infrastructure, disaster management, counter-terrorism. So all these have become focus areas of the Quad. So Quad looks like more like a economic multilateral grouping, and it's not just a security grouping, it's not just a military-like grouping. So India insists that it is an informal diplomatic club with focus on multiple areas that affects the Indo-Pacific. So there is focus on open radio access network, in installing such advanced forms of communication in the Pacific Island countries like Palau. Quad is working on an initiative to set up space-based early warning system for natural disasters in Mauritius. They are also working on off-grid solar projects, clean renewable energy projects across Indo-Pacific Island countries to provide them with clean energy. And there is also a proposal to set up a STEM cohort to promote science, technology, engineering and mathematics education amongst the Quad members. So these are some different initiatives of the Quad, and India has a lot to contribute to the group. So we need to look forward to the upcoming Leaders Summit, which will happen on 21st September. So based on the outcomes, we'll have one more discussion. Now let's look at two small articles relevant for prelims and mains. Let's look at this article on page number 3. This is related to space cooperation between India and France. I'm sure all of you know that France is a key partner to India in the Europe region. We already have very close economic, strategic defense relations. France is a key supplier of defense technology and military hardware. But we also have very close space relations. So the chief of CNES, the French Space Agency, he is in India, in Bengaluru, visiting the headquarters of ISRO to promote the collaboration between ISRO and the French Space Agency. So he has spoken about the joint initiatives, the collaborative initiatives, and that is what you need to know. So one of the upcoming projects between ISRO and CNES is the Trishna satellite. Now this is important for your prelims, could be relevant for mains as well if there is a question on India-France relations. Trishna satellite is an upcoming project. It stands for Thermal Infrared Imaging Satellite for High Resolution Resource Assessment. It essentially carries a thermal imaging payload using infrared radiation to capture high resolution pictures of the Earth for assessing resources on the Earth. So this civilian satellite will serve a critical purpose. It will help in gathering information on climate change, global warming, in carrying out resource assessment for agriculture, disaster management, drought forecasting, and even to monitor heat waves and urban heat islands. So this mission is slated to be launched in 2026, a joint satellite mission between ISRO and the French CNES. Another important area where India and France are collaborating is the Gaganyaan mission, India's first manned space flight. India is all geared up to place astronauts in orbit under the Gaganyaan mission, and France is a key collaborator. It is helping ISRO in the field of space medicine, in understanding the physiological impact on astronauts when they are in space, in understanding the requirements of space medicine, what kind of interventions have to be developed, specifically tailor-made for the astronauts. So in this domain, France is a leader. It is helping India in the domain of space medicine as well. Is that clear? So France is a key partner to India in space cooperation. Next article on page number 6, related to internal security. The Union Cabinet has approved a 31,000 crore project for setting up a border fence on the India-Myanmar border. See, India shares a 1,643 kilometer border with Myanmar. Northeastern states like Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram share this long boundary, and this is a very delicate, sensitive, highly porous border because the geography, the terrain is very complicated. There are natural gaps in the border. It's a hilly, mountainous terrain, densely forested area, remote areas. So it's not easy to patrol and deploy troops, border guarding troops across this border. And this border is heavily misused by organized criminals and insurgents. Myanmar is part of the Golden Triangle region, which is a hub of organized crime, narcotic production and drug trafficking and arms smuggling, which enables insurgent and terrorist activities. So from across the border in Myanmar, there is a free flow of drugs and weapons and other illicit material. Large-scale smuggling, including wildlife trafficking, human trafficking is very rampant. Plus the infiltration of the insurgents and terrorists, which has enabled Northeast insurgency. This has always remained a security threat for India. In fact, the government has even linked the latest ethnic violence in Manipur with cross-border factors emanating from Myanmar. As you know, Myanmar is going through a civil war. There has been a refugee crisis, and security agencies have connected the ethnic violence in Manipur with cross-border factors emanating from Myanmar. So recently, Home Ministry suspended the free movement regime. India-Myanmar had an arrangement established in 2016 that allowed people in the border areas to travel up to 16 kilometers on the other side without a visa. A visa-free corridor had been created to promote border trade and people-to-people relations. So those villages present within 16 kilometers of the border on both sides, the people domiciled in these villages, they just have to get a document. They don't need a regular visa from the other country, and they could easily travel to the other country within 16 kilometers to meet their family members, their relatives, to trade with the other side and come back. So such a free movement regime had been created to promote economic ties and cultural relations. But now the government of India has suspended the free movement regime because this is seen as a security threat, as it has been misused by insurgents and organized criminals and even refugees. So India has suspended the free movement regime, and Home Ministry ordered the fencing of the border, which is a very complex and expensive exercise. So now the Union government has approved the cabinet has approved 31,000 crore rupees. This is the amount allocated for fencing of the border, which has already started. A few kilometers have already been fenced in Manipur near More, which is a commercial border town. Now the entire stretch of the border is likely to be fenced, and the required financial support has been announced by the government. Now coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look at all the small articles. But before that, you can join my Telegram channel to receive notes and regular updates. You can scan the QR code and ensure that you are part of the community so that we can remain in touch. Now let's look at the smaller articles. On the front page, the Hindu carries an image, a bright colorful image of a folk art, which can be important for prelims under art and culture. In this image, the folk art which has been depicted is called Pulikali or tiger dance, also called Pili Vesha or Huli Vesha. So this form of tiger dance is specific to the state of Kerala, where the artists, the dancers, they paint themselves, they use body paint and certain gears and accessories to dress up as a tiger. Tiger is a worshipped and a feared and a widely regarded animal in the Western Ghats. So tiger dance is a tribute not just to the animal but to nature, to forest, and a lot of communities in coastal Kerala, in interior parts of Kerala, right, and also in coastal Karnataka, they look at tiger dance as a form of holy worship as well. On sacred events, the dance is performed, especially after Onam. During Onam celebrations in Kerala, the Pulikali is celebrated and marked in Kerala. It's a type of folk art. There is a similar version in coastal Karnataka. In nearby coastal Karnataka, in the Mangalore-Udupi belt, a very similar dance is performed called Huli Vesha or Pili Vesha, where the dancer dons the costume of a tiger, uses body paint and costume and other accessories to look like a tiger, and this popular dance, which is a folk art in Kerala and Karnataka, is performed and celebrated. On page number 3, we have another topic related to art and culture, again related to the Onam festival. See, during Onam festival, another popular event in Kerala is the boat race, the Snakeboat race, which has a lot of cultural significance. In the legendary backwaters of Kerala, particularly in the Alappuzha region, Kochi and the Arnamula region over here, these snakeboat races are conducted, called Paliyodams, right? It's very competitive race as well, also called Valam Kali. And the most popular boat race event is the Nehru Trophy boat race. So these unique boats, which are shaped like a snake and painted exquisitely, they are used by the locals, right? They train, they practice. It's almost a competitive sport. Today, it's being promoted on the lines of, let's say, IPL, to turn this into a major competitive sport, right? So that is a integral part of Kerala's culture, and it is seen during the Onam festival. Now coming to a very important update from science and technology. See, in yesterday's cabinet meeting, a lot of important decisions were taken. One important decision is the approval given to new space projects. So take a quick look. Chandrayaan 4 mission has been approved. ISRO has succeeded with Chandrayaan 3. We successfully landed on the South Pole and we deployed a rover as well, right? So now Chandrayaan 4 will logically take the mission to the next step, which will focus on sample return. We'll not only deploy a lander and a rover, right, but the rover will collect samples, lunar samples from the lunar surface, and the mission would be to bring back the samples back to Earth. China has already done this. Recently, China succeeded in a lunar sample return mission. So India will also be gearing up for Chandrayaan 4, and a Venus orbiter mission has been approved by the cabinet. Now this would be our second interplanetary mission after Mangalyaan. After deploying an orbiter around Mars successfully, ISRO is now gearing up for a similar interplanetary mission focused on Venus. The Venus orbiter mission has been approved by the cabinet. And finally, the Bharatiya Antriksh Station has been approved, which ISRO hopes to establish by 2035. Just like the International Space Station, ISRO aspires to have India's own space station called Bharatiya Antriksh Station. Right, by then Gaganyaan program would have taken off, Indian astronauts would have conducted several missions. So the eventual goal is to place Indian astronauts in the space station to conduct scientific experiments by 2035. And eventually by 2040, our ambition is to place Indian astronauts on the moon. India wants to carry out a manned mission to the moon by 2040. That's why we are part of Artemis Accords that we have signed with the United States. So within few months, with the help of US, an Indian astronaut will be taken to the International Space Station as part of the preparatory efforts. US is helping India with the Gaganyaan mission as well. Just like Russia trained our astronauts, US is helping India by taking our astronauts to International Space Station before the upcoming Gaganyaan mission. So in the coming years, India, US and other like-minded countries, Japan, European countries, etc., they'll all collaborate and work together to place astronauts on the moon with the goal of eventually establishing a human habitation on the lunar surface. Next, on page 6, we have a government scheme in the news, PM-AASHA. Union Cabinet has approved the extension of schemes under PM-AASHA. So let's quickly understand what is PM-AASHA. Pradhan Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshan Abhiyan. It's a very important scheme of the government to promote the livelihood of farmers, to ensure remunerative pricing for the farmers while controlling prices for the consumers. So under this scheme, there are many initiatives. For example, Price Support Scheme, PSS. This has been extended. So government can provide remunerative pricing for the farmers to give them a minimum income, to guarantee their livelihood, and at the same time, it will help the government to build up a buffer stock which can be used to control the prices in the market, especially of essential items. There is a price stabilization fund which is being set up. This will allow the government to protect consumers, especially volatile products like fruits and vegetables. Horticultural products are very volatile in their prices. So through this umbrella scheme, on one hand, government can give remunerative pricing to farmers to keep the overall prices low while guaranteeing a basic income to farmers, and it can procure the fruits and vegetables, create a buffer stock and ensure that there is enough supply to keep the prices low for the consumer. This can help in tackling hoarding. It can help in controlling artificial inflation created by hoarders, right? So the scheme serves a very important purpose and the government has approved the extension of the scheme. And also with regard to nutrient-based subsidy, the cabinet has extended the support for the upcoming cropping season. So under nutrient-based subsidy scheme, essential inputs like potassium, phosphorus, right? They will continue to enjoy subsidy support, but it will be rationalized so that it's not a drain on government's exchequer, but it will provide the required input support to farmers. So these are some important decisions related to PM-AASHA taken by the Union Cabinet. Next, another important decision is related to a government scheme called PMJUGA, Pradhan Mantri Janjati Unnat Gram Abhiyan. It's a dedicated central scheme to benefit the tribal communities, to provide for tribal welfare in the country. This scheme is focused on forest dwelling tribes, the scheduled tribes of India. It focuses on securing forest rights for tribal welfare. It's focused on securing livelihood rights and dwelling rights for the scheduled tribes and forest dwelling tribes of India. And the government has approved a new initiative under this ambitious scheme. So under the Swadesh Darshan scheme of Ministry of Tourism, which is focused on boosting domestic tourism, 5 lakh rupees will be given to every tribal family to convert their home into a homestay or to build a new homestay facility which can be managed by tribal families to attract domestic tourists. It's a tourism initiative. It will not only boost domestic tourism under Swadesh Darshan scheme, right? So 5 lakh rupees will be given to tribal households so they can renovate their tribal house. And I hope you know, in forest areas where the scheduled tribes and forest dwelling tribes are located, they have very traditional indigenous forms of accommodation, right? They have very unique huts or cave-like structures or tree-based structures where they reside. For example, if you look at the Ooty region, right, in Nilgiris, the tribal communities there, they have a very unique hut structure, very unique indigenous accommodation that they have. Now, such places of residence can make for beautiful homestays for tourists. It can be very attractive. Many countries have exploited this already. If you look at, let's say, Central Asian countries, right? Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, even Mongolia, the nomadic tribes, they reside in these yurts, which is a igloo-like structure. It has become widely popular, a rage amongst tourists, right? So the local community rents it out, just like a Airbnb for tourists, and they generate a livelihood from this. So India is experimenting with a similar idea. We are incentivizing our tribal communities to improve the houses, create better facilities, to renovate their houses, their traditional homes, and give it out for tourists on a rent basis. This can create livelihood, bring additional income to tribal communities, and provide for tribal welfare. So that is the innovative initiative being launched under Pradhan Mantri Jan Jati Unnat Gram Abhiyan. Next, an update about India's projects abroad. Kenya's international airport, the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, is supposed to be renovated and upgraded, and this key strategic project has been won by India's Adani Group. See, of late, India's Adani Group has played a pivotal role in Indian foreign policy. It has secured some key infrastructure projects which have strategic value, be it the West Container Terminal at Colombo from Sri Lanka, or be it the Sitwe port in Myanmar as part of the Kaladan project, or be it the Haifa port in Israel, which is likely to be part of the IMEC corridor, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Many such strategic projects, seaports, airports, etc., they have been procured by Adani Group, and this gives India a strategic advantage. Just like Chinese companies in a way give advantage for China in its diplomacy, such projects by Indian companies add heft to Indian diplomacy as well. So Adani Group has won a project to renovate, upgrade, refurbish the Kenyan International Airport in Nairobi. And this is a strategic project because East Africa is a focus as it faces the Indian Ocean. Kenya is a key Indian Ocean power and a key East African country. So we have major interests here in Africa and in the Indian Ocean. See, China is already a significant player over here. In Kenya, China has built a strategic seaport. Even in Tanzania, Mozambique, in all these East African countries, China has invested in strategic seaports. Now, an Indian company had won a contract to refurbish and renovate the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport at Nairobi. But there have been protests against this project. It's been alleged that the deal was signed secretly between Kenyan government and Adani Group. So local Kenyans have protested and they are trying to derail the project. Now, this is generally a pattern that we have seen. Whenever India takes up such projects, be it the East Container Terminal at Colombo, which we had won with Japan, or be it the various projects in Seychelles at Assumption Island, or even the strategic projects we recently built at Agalega Island in Mauritius, many of these strategic projects have faced local protests. Even in Nepal, our hydroelectric projects have faced local protests. India has a reason to believe that China could be behind these local protests. It could be instigating the locals to protest against Indian projects in order to derail these Indian initiatives, right? That is a suspicion held by India. So now the protests in Kenya have raised concerns for India. Adani Group might lose the project, which could be a setback for India, right? And if it is true that China might be involved, if it is a possibility, then it represents the ongoing competition as well between India and China, right? But the allegations aside, at least to know that these projects are being handled by Indian companies is very important. Maybe there could be map-based questions. Coming to the last topic for today, before we close the session, this article on page 12 gives us an idea about manganese distribution around the world. Manganese Ore India Limited, a public sector company involved in manganese ore exploration and exploitation, it has stated its interests to work with state governments and also work with foreign governments to procure manganese, which is a critical raw material. Manganese ore plays a crucial role in the steel industry, for example. It is used to regulate the manganese content in the hot metal, when steel is being manufactured. And it has many other industrial applications. So if you look at the top countries with the highest reserves of manganese, South Africa comes right at the top. South Africa is considered to have the world's largest manganese reserve, followed by the African country of Gabon, followed by Australia. Australia is also blessed with significant manganese reserves. It's also one of the top exporters of manganese in the world. And also in the LATAM region, in the Latin America region, Brazil has significant reserves of manganese. So India is working with all the 4 countries. MOIL, Manganese Ore India Limited, has stated interest to work with all these foreign countries to secure manganese mines to meet India's industrial requirement. MOIL is also working with state governments like Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, where domestic reserves are found, but we also need offshore overseas assets. So it's going to work with these top countries to secure this critical resource for India. That is it. With this, we complete the Hindu analysis for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, understood all the key topics. And if you like the session, do let me know by pressing the like button. Also comment below if you understood everything. If you have any doubts or any suggestions, do let us know. And also your comments will encourage us to do better as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good day.